Howdy readers, I'm Jason, this is Chapter and Verse, and today I'm coming at you with a tag that I'm going to have to really kind of burn through quickly. This is the 52 Nifty Bookish Qs or Questions tag. I was tagged in the original by Adrian over at Stripped Cover Lit, and I've also been tagged by Paul at PK's Books and Sean the Book Maniac. So I will link all of those videos below. There are 52 questions. So let's get started. Number one, what book are you reading right now? I'm reading Fools of Fortune by William Trevor. What was the last thing you highlighted? The last thing I highlighted was a Penguin Classics edition of Walt Whitman in graduate school. The highlighter bled through the page. I was incredibly pissed, and so I don't highlight in books anymore. And it made me think less of the paper quality in Penguin Classics. Number three, what do you plan to read next? I'm going to be reading the third Betsy Tacy book, which is Betsy and Tacy Go Over the Big Hill. And I'm going to be reading The Pigeon Tunnel, the memoir by John le Carre. Number 4, 5, and 6, right? A fiction writer, a non-fiction writer, and a poet, living or dead, with whom I'd like to have a drink. Fiction writer would be Charles Dickens, and I would spend the time trying to convince him that Shakespeare actually wrote the plays of Shakespeare. Non-fiction writer would be Shelby Foote, whose work I haven't read, but I absolutely love listening to him talk about the Civil War in the Ken Burns documentary. And then the third, the poet, would be my old friend Scott Starbuck, because it's been far too long since he and I have sat down and had a drink. Number 7, one booktuber with whom I'd like to grab a drink. Brian from Bookish. I was his answer for that question. He is my answer for that question. And I feel sure that someday we will be grabbing that drink. Number 8, Emily Dickinson or Edgar Allan Poe. Edgar Allan Poe for the Cask of Amontillado alone. Number 9, Hemingway or Fitzgerald. Fitzgerald. Number 10, Jane Austen or Charles Dickens. Charles Dickens. Number 11, Sam Harris or Christopher Hitchens. Chris Hedges, thank you. Number 12, Stephen King or Michael Crichton. Michael Crichton, before his crazy politics went front and center in his books. Number 13, Bret Easton Ellis or Chuck Palahniuk. I've only read a short story of Chuck Palahniuk's. I have no desire to read any of his novels, no desire to read any novels from Bret Easton Ellis, so I plead the fifth on that one. Number 14, Kurt Vonnegut or John Green. Kurt Vonnegut. Number 15, Shakespeare's poems or plays. His plays. Number 16, Adrian Fort or Dalton Gentry. I would go with The Love Child Born of Their Union. Number 17, Cormac McCarthy or J.K. Rowling. Cormac McCarthy, y'all know me. 18, Hannibal Lecter or Voldemort. And that's an easy one. Hannibal freaking Lecter, as played by Anthony Hopkins. Number 19, T.C. Boyle or George Saunders. This was difficult. I've read one novel from each of them. I gave both of those novels 5 stars. If I had to choose, I would say Water Music maybe just slightly edges out Lincoln and the Bardo, just because I love that kind of dense, ornate prose style that we see in T.C. Boyle. 21, YA or Children's Lit. If Children's Lit might be Kate DiCamillo, E.B. White, the Betsy Tacy books, then definitely Children's Lit. 22, irony or humor, probably irony. 23, sci-fi or horror, sci-fi. 24, fantasy or nonfiction. So even though the Dragonlance Chronicles novels were super important to me as a teenager, that's definitely nonfiction, now that I'm 44. Number 25, rather find a new favorite contemporary writer or a new favorite old-time great. Definitely a new favorite old-time great. I have yet to read Tolstoy or Dostoevsky, for instance. I suspect I'm going to like them when I finally do. 26, sonnet or haiku, sonnet. 27, Sestina or Villanelle, definitely Sestina. 28, spend the evening at a library or a bookstore. A bookstore, by all means, preferably with about $200 in my pocket. 29, magazine or Wikipedia article. Definitely magazine. I don't subscribe to much anymore. I think Kelly and I only subscribe to Tennis right now. But back in the day, say when I was in college, I subscribed to Harper's, and I absolutely loved reading Harper's cover to cover. Number 30, dictionary or encyclopedia. I'm going to go with dictionary, not just because I'm a word person, but also because of the scene in Frankie and Johnny, the film starring Michelle Pfeiffer and Al Pacino, in which Al Pacino talks about how he looks up a new word in the dictionary every day while he's shaving, which is something I think I would do if I shaved, which obviously I don't. 31, the writer I would like to write my biography. I'm going to go with Jenny Uglow. Now, I have not read any of her biographies yet, but she seems to take really interesting, unique, kind of sidelong approaches to her material. So if ever there was a biographer who would be able to kind of really flesh out the desire in me to rule the world, Jenny Uglow would probably be the one. Number 32, do you highlight in your books? Not anymore. See question 2 for that. Number 33, do you write in your books? Not since grad school. Number 34, earliest memory of a library. And that would be getting my library card, my first library card at Laramie County Library in Cheyenne. And I remember it because I had to sign the back of it. And I was still at that point, as a very young kid, signing my name with a traditional capital letter J, and I hate how the traditional capital letter J looks, and so I just felt really sad, really depressed that it was essentially kind of immortalized right in this library card. There was nothing I could do to change it, and so I vowed then and there to kind of invent a new capital letter J, cursive capital letter J, so that the next time I got a library card, it would have a letter J that I was pleased with, and I did. I invented my own capital letter J. Number 35, last time you went to the library. That would be 3 days ago to check out 3 movies I had on hold, one of which I'll be watching tonight. Number 36, ever stolen a book from a library? So I haven't stolen one myself, but I did have a friend steal one for me once. It was a biography of Sappho, and I can't remember which library it was. It was one of the college libraries here in Wyoming, and I think I put it in the book drop of another library a few years later because the guilt was just kind of eating away at me. 37, ballpark, how many books do you own? Kelly and I own approximately 1,000 books. 38, how many books do you think would make for a reasonable personal library? I think that's personal preference. 39, classic monster mashups, right? Like Pride and Prejudice and Zombies, for instance. How do I feel about the phenomenon? I haven't read any of them yet, but it seems like a fun idea. I really like the movie Pride and Prejudice and Zombies. Number 40, horror trope you'd like to get more love. I have no answer at all for that question. 41, something you think is underutilized in science fiction. I would say beautiful prose for that. 42, flash fiction, form of literature or just a short story, dummy. Flash fiction seems to me to be the prose version of Insta poetry. That's probably all I need to say about that. 43, if you could own one book from all of history, what would it be? That would be the Victoria Lucas edition of the Bell Jar. 44, audiobooks, the same as reading? No, it's not. And instead of kind of elaborating on why, I will direct you to Steve Donahue's take on this tag and Paul Kennedy's take on this tag over at PK's Books. Those two guys together kind of said all I would say about audiobooks. 45, most literary songwriter of my lifetime. I'm going to choose Tori Amos, and this is her kind of box set thing, Tales of a Librarian, which seems appropriate here on BookTube. Let's see, 46, what writer embarrasses you the most because you haven't read them? I think embarrasses is the wrong word. That seems to be the consensus in people doing this tag. Maybe sheepish. Maybe I feel a little sheepish because I haven't read writer X, Y, or Z. But I would say Dostoevsky. 47, what writer embarrasses you the most because you've read too much of them? Again, embarrass, wrong word. But I do feel a little bit sheepish about how much I love the Robert Langdon novels by Dan Brown. 48, a biography you're looking forward to reading. This one here, which I will be reading later this year. 49, do you have a dream reading cubby? So I have always kind of dreamed about having a window seat in which to read. But I was thinking about it the other day, and window seats, the back of, so if you're like leaning up in one, you're leaning against something that is slanted. So it would have to be a custom designed window seat. So I suppose, yes, there is a dream reading cubby in my mind. 50, last literary phenomenon that really got your gears grinding, Insta poetry. It's bullshit. It's such a bullshit thing. 51, what was the last work of literature that changed the way you read? This is a tricky one to answer, and I'm not sure these changed the way I read, but I wanted to mention Silence by Shusaku Endo, A Perfect Spy by John le Carre, and To the Lighthouse by Virginia Woolf. And all three of those books had endings, by which I mean like literally the last page, 2 pages, at most 3 pages, that completely elevated the book for me. I mean, I was enjoying each of the books before that, but those last couple of pages in each of those books elevated each one of the books from 3 stars to 4 stars single-handedly. So I think those are really good arguments for sticking with a book. So if I hadn't been liking To the Lighthouse, the ending of Woolf's novel probably would have changed that. We have to read books before we can know how we feel about them. Yeah, I might have buttons made up, right, that have like a DNF with like a circle around it and a line through it, something like this. And the last question, what booktuber have you been watching the most here lately? So I watch all of Steve Donahue's mail hauls. I watch a lot of Johnny Keene, and apart from those two, I've been watching Bookish a lot lately, and Paperback Junkie. Actually, let's see. And who do you tag? I'm going to tag Andrew B., who is a booktuber who absolutely deserves to have more people watching his channel. He is incredibly smart, and he's really droll. I find myself laughing a hell of a lot at some of his videos. I just think he's wonderful. Jasmine at Novel Thoughts would be great if she did this tag. And then my friend Anna at Bookspotting, who's another kind of new booktuber, and who's just trying to kind of find her feet and find her schedule for posting videos. But they're wonderful, and if you haven't checked out her channel yet, you absolutely should. So that's it. I will sign off here, and I will see you guys in another video here in a few days. Adios.